folks, welcome to My Life with Robert Burns. Jim Thompson and Douglas Mackenzie here again to talk to another of our cronies from around the Burns world. Hi Jim, how you doing?
Doing great, Douglas. Hi everybody.
Our guest tonight is not only a reader of Burns, but a well-respected writer of poetry in his own right and an advocate for the Scots Lead. Tonight, cronies, please welcome Stuart A. Paterson.
Hello and welcome into the body of the kirk.
Thanks, Stuart. How are you?
Aye, fair to hellish as usual, but at least it's, I've just been out for a wee donner outside and it's come down from about 196 degrees to about 20 degrees, but there's something on the way. I don't know what it is, but as long as it's not going to give me sunburn, I'm fine, so I'm fine, thanks.
Aye. Well, it feels that way in Mauchline as well. There's a certain atmosphere that makes you think there's going to be a storm of some sort.
Well, that's why Robbie got out here.
Stuart, we always start these things by asking the simple question, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Aye, no bother, Douglas. My name's Stuart Paterson, sometimes Stuart A. Paterson. I sometimes put my middle initial in for Andrew because there's another Scottish writer called Stuart Paterson, spelled exactly the same name, quite a well-known playwright who's written loads of pantomimes that have been on in Edinburgh and Glasgow down the years. So I started using the A to differentiate. And aye, I write poetry. I'm 55 now. I've been writing poetry for just about all of my life, I think. I'm lucky enough these days to actually make my living through doing what I love. So that, you can't ask any more than that, really. I would like to say I was born and brought up in Ayrshire, but I was definitely brought up in Ayrshire. I wasn't born there, but that's a wee story maybe for later. Grew up in Muirkirk, Markirk, and Kilmarnock, Killie. Went to school there, worked there. I've still got a lot of family there. Can certainly trace my family in Ayrshire way back, and some of it, well, and certainly on my mum's dad's side and my father's side in Gumnock back about 300-400 years. So we've been there a long time, and I think it's in the blood, Ayrshire. No matter when you leave it, you get back to it, and it's in your head, and it's in how you speak, and I think how you live your life to some extent. So aye, these days I live down in Galloway, by near the Solway Firth with my partner, and aye, I work as a poet, I work as a writer, an advocate for the Scots language, as you say, but you know, there's a lot of that basically isn't paid, but it doesn't matter because everybody needs to care about it, and I'm happy to take that on. So I'm really happy in what I'm doing these days, aye.
And did you go to school in Kilmarnock?
I went to the Jimmy Hamilton, the James Hamilton, and I went there my first year in 1977, and that was the year that the new one opened. The old one shut that year. It's now the I think the council headquarters down in London Road. So aye, I went to school there. Before that, I went to school up in New Farm Walk, Silverwood Primary, which again has been demolished. In fact, even the new Jimmy Hamilton's been demolished, it turns out. They've got a new campus named for, well, one of Kelly's finest sons, a writer that I really admire, loved, knew him up quite a bit, met him down the years, Willie McIlvany. So the fact that somebody knew, a new Scottish writer, if you like, although he's dead, is commemorated in that way in an educational establishment, makes me glad that, you know, aye, the skill's away, but the new one's named in Willie's name, so it's fantastic, aye.
And did you start writing at school?
I suppose I did. I mean, it's funny actually, somebody asked me this the other week, what was the first thing you ever wrote? And they were all expecting me to come out with, I don't know, a bit of Burns pastiche or a poem or something, but no. I remember around about the age of, probably about 7 or 8 year old, we were asked by the teacher to write a story about, I don't know, it's a kind of fantasy or something like that. And I ended up, right, don't ask me where I get these ideas from. I still don't ken where they come from, but I had this idea for a story of a scientist who invented time travel. And he went into the past, into about 1,000 years ago, into the Viking Age. And he decided to take a Viking and cut off his bottom half and put 3 wheels on him so as he could move quicker and get into the battles quicker. And the name of the story was the 3-wheeled Viking. Don't know where it is, don't really care. But apparently it won some kind of class competition or something like that. So the very first thing I ever wrote was in English, and it was called the 3-wheeled Viking. There you go. And if you've got it, if you've got it in your press or in your attic somewhere, chuck it in the bin.
And what subjects did you do at secondary school?
It's the same as always, Douglas. English, maths, science. But I mean, I wasn't really. I sat my maths O level twice and failed it twice. Never got any science. O levels. That showed my age at all. O levels. So I was really into my modern studies, which was kind of, politics, the modern world, learning about recent history. Geography I liked as well. I was really into the landscape from an early age, physically, and then learning about it at the school. And certainly English, because I had a great love of language and words from a really early age. And I got that for him in the way we spoke and the way we spoke to each other and the encouragement we got to learn at him. I mean, I mind as a wee boy, my mother getting me, it was called the New World Encyclopedia. So there have been about maybe 8, 9, 10-year-old, and it came out every week or every 2 weeks, and there was something like 30 volumes, and you would get one every couple of weeks, and then you put it up in your shelf. And I had this massive collection of encyclopedias for young folk at quite a young age, and I was learning all sorts of stuff. So it was brilliant just to do it in my own time and go home wherever I wanted and to read about stuff and to learn stuff that wasn't getting drilled into me, if you like, as you might have seen it by a teacher or somebody at the school.
And what did you do after school?
After school, I applied to go to Napier University when I was 16. When I was at primary school, I should explain, I got picked for it a year. They had a thing back in the day, I don't know if you'll mind it yourself, but it was called Pilot Library and something else called SRA, and they were like kind of miniature reading courses and comprehension courses, and you did them every week, units about comprehending what you were reading, and I got through it in half a school year, and so they picked me up a year. So I went from primary 3 right up to primary 4 in the 1 year, without going to the end of the year. So I was a year older, a year younger than most folk in my year. So that was, I left the school just when I turned 16, when I'd done 5th year. And I applied, as I said, to Napier University to do a course in journalism, because to me that was a really interesting thing, involving writing, imagination, the modern world, all the stuff that I was kind of interested in at the school. And it turned out that you needed to be 17 to go to do this HND, Higher National Diploma in Journalism. And so I just left the school, and again, showing my age, went into a youth opportunities programme scheme for 6 months and worked for £25 a week. But every summer, anyway, from about the age of 14, I'd be working at Llewellyn Creamery in Kilmarnock because my father worked there. So I used to go up there for about 4, 6, 8 weeks in the summer and work. And then when I left the school, as I said, I went to a YOP job for 6 months, come out of that government scheme, and then just went into work till I was about 22. And then by that time, went back to college to sit another couple of hires, and went on to uni when I was 22 or 23.
And what did you do at uni?
I'm not wanting to get myself in trouble. Not very much. I mean, I went in to study philosophy, French and history. And by the time I got to second year, I was studying English. And I just failed my degree in 1992. Was it 92? Aye, 92. I took a year out in 90 in and went and worked in Arran for about 8 months, worked in a hotel. and travelling about a bit. And then in '92, when I'd started writing, if you like, for real, for serious poetry, I was lucky enough to get a major award, and it came just before I was due to sit at the end of my degree. But I got a big amount of money for the award for the UK Society of Authors when I was 26. They gave me £4,000.
Wow.
I went into London to collect it off a Nobel Prize winner. What a great night that was, apparently, until I can't mind how much it. But it paid off £3,000 in my overdraft because I was a student. And the other grand, I just went and bought camping equipment and buggered off up the Highlands and the West Coast for about 2 months. And by the time I came back, the final exams for my degree were by me. So I never got my degree. And then I had a chance to go back to it in 1996 to finish the last 3 months. But something else came up as well, which again was writing related. And I've not looked back and regretted anything, you know. So it's all added up and came along, you know, when I was least expecting it, but it's helped. Aye.
So you've basically been a writer all your days then?
Aye, I mean, I've been writing all my days. I've not always been getting paid for it. It's not always paid the bills and made me a living, all that, Douglas, but it has done certainly the last few years, and it certainly has done from time to time. Apart from, there was one block of time between the late 90s and about 9 years ago where I was away outside of Scotland doing something completely different. And I moved away from writing altogether. But aye, you know, I've always had the interest. And it's like one of the things folks say, why do you write poetry? Or why do you paint? Or why do you, I don't know, play football? Well, you do it because it's part of you. It's like breathing. It's something that you can't help. It's just something that you do. And you don't think about it. You just do it. So I might look at it that way, as it's just a part of who I became based on how I was brought up, who brought me up, my language, the house I was in, the folk that was in the house, the stories, the poems, the language, aye, and all that kind of thing kind of makes you who you are.
And what got you, or what took you down to Dumfries and Galloway?
Well, in 1996, it was 4 years since I'd no got my degree, and in that time, in Kilmarnock, I went back down to Killie, and basically was just running community education, creative writing workshops for a local centre, Strathclyde region as it was at the time. So one of the regional council further education centres, I would run courses for them. And I was doing that for about 3 or 4 years and doing various other things and writing loads and just this, that and the other. And then in 96, I'd applied back to Stirling Uni where I'd no got my degree, and they accepted me back to finish it off. But at exactly the same time, my pal persuaded me to go for a job that he'd heard about. And he brought in the newspaper here and there. I was staying in Goston at the time, actually, a flat up in Goston, where, of course, Billy Kay comes from, Billy Kay. And my pal come up, Jason come up the stair, and he says, look at that advert in the paper. So I looked at it and I thought, I'm going to go for that. Why, you know, Ken, nothing ventured. And the post was for a writer in residence for Dumfries and Galloway, the whole region. And it was run by this, as it was at the time, the Scottish Arts Council, which is now Creative Scotland, and Dumfries and Galloway Arts Association. And I applied for it, and they wanted somebody to go and work in all the secondary schools in the region in terms of encouraging creative writing, encouraging Scots, all that kind of thing. And also working in libraries with Weir Wains and working in, you know, all sorts of groups and writers groups and encouraging publications and events. And I just kind of come down and went for the interview thinking, that's, you know, it'll be a good experience if I want to do this kind of thing in future. And I wasn't even 30, I don't think. And they turned around and said, you want the job? And I was like, oh, right. And I did. And I moved out to Dumfries in 96 and had to write back to the uni, who had literally wrote to me the same day, Douglas, as the Arts Association said, I will have you back early next year to finish your degree. And I had to think about it for about, maybe an hour. And I decided, I'm going to write back to them and say, no, something else has come up. Thanks for the offer. And then I came to Dumfries, round about the same age as when Robbie came to Dumfries, or Nithsdale, when I was about 29, 30, was when he came to Dumfries. So it kind of felt, it didn't feel a wee, it does looking back now, Ken, you're going away down there because something else came up that was maybe better than where you are. And that's what happened to me.
So we've talked a bit about your writing and your poetry. Any chance you could give us a wee sample?
My poetry?
Yeah, that would be great.
Aye, well, let's see what we've got here. Let's see what's on the screen. Aye, well, one that is quite interesting me, and it has been published here and there, but I was asked to write a poem for the BBC a wee while back, and for a book about, you know, Burns, about Rabbie. And when I hear about Rabbie, and the people that were writing at the same time as Rabbie, I hear about the folk that he inspired, but the folk that were about at the same time, you think, there must have been hundreds of poets thinking, God, I wish I was Rabbie, or I wish I kent where Rabbie had met, or had his publisher. And you've never heard that any of them now, you know. So I wrote a poem kind of based on that idea about the other maker. And it's in Scots, and it's called The Other Maker's Lament, being a channeled fragment of a longer poem by an unnamed contemporary of Robert Burns. I'm bookless and poor, and my graith is gey dour. I'm a diver for maist of my days. I'm a walt with the wine, puggled maist of the time. I'm a dwellin' for six kind of fleas. Nae acres o' lawn, nor nae siller to hone, nae glib glabbit patrons to guide me, nae wheel stocket gowd, nor nae havens a dow, nae trothed muckle bosom to chide me, nae braw healing Marys, nae ventures wi' fairies and witches and warlocks and pel me. I grew at the haggis and sniffed at baggies, and thochts o' a rodent repel me. I hae pied for my thoughts, through my fameness for mots, to the bricht brawly clash o' the yill. I hae many old shin in this clavering tune, and been cried for a bairn and a bill. I hae scant fegs in life, no a biggin nor tithe, fiend I can't remead for my sturt. I hae nae way to see who my time bears the grey, for the waters are burning till dirt. What wreck though, this world has made me a carle wi' nocht but a quill for my grievance. What wreck now I'm deed, this new world can gae screed to the such and the snash o' my screevings.
Very good, well done. You've been away from Kilmarnock for a while, but you've not lost your loyalty to your local team here.
There's only one team in Ayrshire, Douglas, and it's no Markirk Juniors.
So have you been a regular attender all these years?
No, I was away for Scotland for about 15 years, up to 10 years ago, and being down here, of course, I've been busy as well, working, etc., etc. And as you can know, it's not even called the Kelly pie, it's called the Kilmarnock pie. So I'm sorry, the minute that changed, but it's not a cheap day out. And I like to go when I can, but not as regular as I used to, although, of course, I was there in 1997 for our glorious days. The most glorious day as a Kelly fan, and the paper roses were in full bloom that day, and I did write a poem about it actually. So
very good. You've got a pal up in the corner there.
1997 Scottish Cup final, Kilmarnock won, Falkirk nil. We beat the Bairns. So what a great day that was, and it wasn't even at Hampden, it was at Ibrox, which made it even sweeter.
Very good.
Kelly to lad, aye, definitely.
Well, you've got plenty of pals in New County Burns Club. I reckon there's probably more Kelly supporters than in any other team.
Aye, Rad Wilson will not be one of them, mind you. I think he's a Glens boys, you know.
Oh, very much so, very much so. You hinted a wee bit about the time of you'd been born, that there was a bit of a story there. Is that one you can tell us?
Well, there was these four shepherds come out the east with some gifts for me. No, that was a different one. Aye, in 1960, my mother and father took a really big step for back then and moved away from Ayrshire. They had already had two weans, my big brother and my big sister. And my mother's sister, also from Markart, she's dead now, bless her, Marion. Mary had met a Cornishman after he'd mobbed World War II and for the army in I think it was the early 50s. And he was a Penhaligon, so I said Cornish. And they ended up there in Cornwall. And my mother and father got married in 55, and my brother and sister. Stroch on a wall up here at the pit head, ken all the rest of it. And my mum was a craw picker, working, that's where she met my father, at the pit up in Markirk. And aye, it was hard life, and it was basically, speaking to my sister, they decided, my mum's sister, they decided to move into Cornwall in 1960. And my father got a job in Truro. He was a great gardener, my dad, a great love of nature and the land. And he got a job as a gardener in a convent in Truro, which was the home of, at the time, the Little Sisters of the Epiphany. Now, 1966 in England, as you know, was something happened. I can't mind what it was, but it was quite important. Yeah. But of course, I wasn't in England. I was over the Tamar, and I was in Cornwall in the Celtic nations. And I popped along in '66, and a part of the community in which I grew up. My godmother was the Right Reverend Sister Juliet. My godfather was one of my godfathers was Father Newton, and my other godfather was a landscape gardener for Paterson. So I didn't remember it really at all, but my brother and sister remember it. And I was baptised in St Paul's in Truro, and there was all sorts. I even made the front page apparently of the local paper, the Truro Gazette, because I was the first Wayne to be born there at that place for exactly 100 years. So there weren't any three kings turning up at the door, but it's a wee bit interesting backstory, I suppose. And I never went back there until about I think it was about 10 years ago when I went down. And the convent's away now, and the lodge that I was born in there is away. But they built as a new lodge because my mum had just gave birth and had two weans. And the new lodge, I got to look about that because the woman that asked me in when she saw I was looking about, and the lodge is now, the convent is now a 4-star hotel called the Alverton Lodge. It cost me £150 to stay for one night. I never got a discount, even though I was born there. But interestingly, I went for a pint up the back, and a pub up the back of where the convent was, and I met a fella who'd been married by my godfather in the same year I was born, and who remembered my dad. So it was amazing.
Well, I think there's probably a poem in there unless you've written one already.
It's far too unlikely to be writing poems about, but no, that was that. And we came back up, as I said, when I was about 2.5, back up to Markirk. So, aye.
Well, that's us go back to Ayrshire, so we can perhaps start talking a bit about your interest in Burns, and I'll pass over to Jim to get that conversation started.
Stuart, as always on these things, the first question I'm going to ask is, how did you get started with Burns?
Well, if you're from Ayrshire, Jim, sometimes who do you mind? You know what I mean? How do you remember these? I mean, I grew up with him very much as part of the familial landscape, the family landscape, part of the local cultural landscape. He was out there. And it wasn't just once a year on the 25th of January, you know, it was my mother and father would be coming out with wee bursts of burns or wee poems or whatever. You would, you know, also, he was always there. And I think I took a real interest when, well, I grew up, as I said, later on in Kilmarnock and New Farnloch, a big scheme up the top. And to get down to a fantastic place, which is the library I grew up going to, and museum, the Dick Institute in Kilmarnock, it was my second home. It was an amazing place. And to get there, you had to walk through the Quay Park. And at the time, you had to go past the Burns Monument, sadly being, you know, mainly, well, partially destroyed by a fire a few years ago. But thankfully, Robbie's big statue is still there. But at the time, it was basically a museum to Burns. And you could go up the top of it also and have amazing views over Ayrshire. You could see all the way out to Arran, you know. And there was all sorts of Burns stuff in there, and it brought him to life for me, you know, as a person. So obviously, I've never put Robbie up there as some kind of, you know, some sort of godlike figure or whatever. He was one of us, and I remember reading his poetry earlier on, thinking, God, there's somebody writing in the same, more or less the same language we're speaking at home and in the playground, and he's writing amazing, amazing sentiments, you know. So I got that for quite an early age, and I wasn't one of these folk, one of these wains who the skill went on. No, it's no Burns night again. As I'm going to go and stand in the corner and recite something. I was just part of my life growing up. He was out there.
Aye, and you're fortunate too that McKee collection was there and is still in the Dick Institute to this day, and is available for folk to go in and see in the South Museum, and some of it's in the North Museum as well, to be honest. But I would advise folk, if they're in Kilmarnock, it's a worthwhile stop, because the printing press that was recreated is there as well. But as a poet, what specifically about Burns, you know, sets you on fire? What do you really like about Burns, you know, from a poetry point of view?
From a poetry point of view, he makes poetry come to life for people. He makes it real, he makes it relative, and it's no high-blowing wishful thinking. Robbie was one of us. He came from our kind of place. He came from a working class background, and he was writing about the kind of things back then that people could relate to. He was writing about their very lives, their hopes. He was writing about egalitarianism. He was writing about democracy and equality. And he was writing it in a language that people could understand, the language that they spoke every day. Aye, okay, it was poetry, and sometimes it was slightly amended, slightly diluted, and sometimes in English for a wider audience later on. But I think Robbie was very much of the people and for the people. And I like that. And that shined immediately for quite an early age for me, being as I'm, you know, a Democrat and somebody who very much loves the idea that equality doesn't have to be earned, it should be there. It should be there for us. We should all be, you know, everybody quotes a man's a man, but, you know, who else was writing stuff like that? It's absolutely fantastic as a young guy to read that and to know that somebody was writing that, a long time ago, and it's as relevant now. And like a lot of his poetry, it's as relevant now as it was back then, maybe even more so in a lot of ways. I mean, I remember first reading Ode to Liberty, and thinking, wow, you know, this is a guy that was supposed to have went to Jamaica, maybe to take up a post as a slave driver. Why would he be writing something like this? And then, of course, recently we had the whole Black Lives Matter movement, which is tremendous and still is, and quite rightly so. And you read Ode to Liberty, and it's as relevant to that as it was back then. So that kind of thing's inspired me as well. I mean, I wrote my own poem about George Floyd in Scots no long after he died, and put it in a book last year. And that kind of thing, I think, for Robbie, it's no sort, you know, it's the sentiment and the feelings as much as it is the language and the actual poetry itself, Jim, you know.
Right. I mean, you're obviously a reader of Burns. Have you been involved in the Burns suppers?
No many, I have to say. I mean, I'm not a great fan of Burns suppers, to be honest with you. They're a wee bit too kind of formal for me, and a wee bit too, there's too much whiskey for a start. And I do love my haggis. But I like to have burns in my life according to how I read them and how I see them. And that's absolutely no disrespect to folk that have burn suppers, because I've been to some crackers down the years. I've even been to an Esperanto burn supper, and that was probably better than any of them. It was amazing. But I like to have my own burn supper, and it doesn't have to. I keep saying to folk, you know, Burns night doesn't have to be one day a year. Burn suppers don't have to be one day a year. Again, we can have them whenever we want. And I'm sitting with a book in my lap now, and it's what, July. I can go to a mod. I wouldn't have a dram, so I'm still drinking, but I can celebrate Burns in a way that's closest to me. And I think that's something that Rob would like as well. I think, to be honest with you, that he would relate to people in the way that they wanted, and that they weren't maybe, you know, had to feel that they had to do. And I think there's a bit of that about the Burn suppers that I think, they're great and they're formal and they're great fun and all the rest of it. But they've also been a very male institution, very much. We've got the address for the lassies and everything, the address for the laddies, but I don't like that kind of boys club mentality that sometimes surrounds famous figures. So again, part of me naturally would react to that.
So I take it from what you're saying, you've never been a member of a Burns club or any of these kind of Burns related institutions?
I'm a member of the Robert Burns World Federation now, Jim. I've become involved with them over the past couple of years. So but again, for me, I've become involved with a different focus of promoting Burns's work and promoting his language and promoting the Scots language through Robbie's brilliant use of it, you know, and also celebrating his life as a person and as a Democrat and as a proponent of equal rights and egalitarianism for people and women and whoever else, you know. And I think there's as much of that to celebrate as there is, obviously, as his fantastic poems, I
just didn't know that. I'm a past president of the organisation. I didn't know you were a member. There you go.
I can't you were a past president, but
well, to be fair to the current incumbent in that role, Mark, he really is pushing Scots language and trying to include lifelong learning as well. And folk like yourself would be absolutely essential in moving that forward.
Well, I mean, that's mainly because I've been so involved recently with the Burns Federation in Kelly, because I'm up in Kelly anyway, seeing my mum and my family. And, you know, it's an hour up the road in the railway for Dumfries, and Dumfries is half an hour from where I abide. But it's been great to go in there and primarily become involved in setting up this new, like what they call a lifelong learning unit, Jim, funded by Boyd Turner, an amazing donation to the Federation. And it was decided that we've got the Burns Federation building, we've got Burns resources, but what we need, or what we'd like to have, is a resource centre and a living resource centre for Scots language itself, for everybody to come in and access and be involved with, and reaching out to the communities round about, to education, to all sorts of folk, because it all has to start with the young folk. And so I've been involved in building up the resource in there, virtual and book-wise, and we've got a lot of great stuff in already. It was supposed to be launched officially, if you like, last week, but it's had to be put back for various reasons. But it's gives us more time, I think, you know, to get it up and running and connect with folk, and not just connect with folk Kilmarnock and Ayrshire, but worldwide. It's got great potential. I'm really, really pleased about it. So it's great to see the Federation doing that.
I was talking to Mark about it yesterday, and I think the idea that there's lifelong learning, the Federation's always been involved with the schools competitions and that sort of thing, and they're wonderful. They really are. They're heartwarming and they're great things to go and see. But there are a lot of people out there who don't fit into that, or have left Burns for a wee while and they want to come back. And I think that's where there's an opportunity there.
Aye, very much. And also, well, more importantly, I mean, that is vital. You're absolutely right. It's definitely a big strand of it. But also, as important, and the most important thing for me is, we don't have a Scots language centre anywhere in the south of Scotland. And to have that suddenly in a building, in an institution, in a long-established institution like the Burns Federation, in the name of Rabi, who spoke that language very much every day and wrote in it every day of his life, is a fantastic opportunity. So for me to be involved with that and getting it up and running is absolutely brilliant. And I'm so chuffed, you know, that they asked me to be involved. So great stuff, aye.
Aye. Well, I think by the time it's open, the Federation will have moved on again. I mean, how do you see yourself involved with the Federation going forward?
I don't know, to be honest with you. I mean, I'm on the literature committee, and that's been great working with folk like Mike Dogood and that. Brilliant sort of things in the making, opportunities arising that we're putting together for, as I said, mainly kind of young folk especially, but and people who will normally be able to access the kind of resources such as might be at the, you know, the Turnock Centre. So folk in the schemes, folk out in the margins, folk in the jails, you know, folk who maybe don't have English as a first language. There's all sorts of possibilities in that respect. And also I'm just applied for a certain position within the Federation because the AGM's coming up, isn't it? So they were looking for nominations for folk to go for certain positions, if you like, and I've put in for one of them. So, you know, if I get it, great. If I don't, then I'm just happy to be involved in promoting Burns, promoting Scots, and getting the word out there, especially young folk and folk that haven't previously had that down to earth association with Rabi and what he stands for, you know.
Well, I hope the position you've applied for, I mean, I haven't got the paperwork through yet, so I don't know, and Mark keeps everything close to his chest, which is perfectly well today, but I hope it's to do with education, and in some form or other in terms of the schools in particular. Having been on both committees in terms of literature and schools, I got the sack for schools right now, but I did the sack me. One of my ideas was a rap contest for Wades and a Burns theme, and that just was, oh dear. Seriously, I nearly got the sack for that one, and then I got the sack for various proposals. However, I hope if you are applying for that, I would say to you, you'll certainly get my support and several others as well.
Aye, it's education convener post, Jim. Aye.
I think
very good.
Good, because I think the intention is to actually split it into two schools and lifelong learning.
Well, I don't know, to be honest with you. I mean, I think we call it the lifelong learning. I mean, God, what a mouth for. Let's just call it what it is, the Scots Language Centre.
Right.
And I think that's something that's going to take a certain amount of dedication, a lot of fun. It's going to attract funding as well, and it's going to attract funding possibly for posts and for work in there, and to bring people in to do stuff and host stuff and have events and education, you know. And I also work as an external verifier for the SQA for the Scots Language Awards. So I actually go into schools throughout Scotland and make sure that schools are delivering the Scots Language Award the right way. And that's moving up and up and up and up and up as well. So there's a great opportunity to involve your local education authorities, the SQA, all sorts of folk in this kind of setup. And it's possibly really exciting, aye.
To me, it is an exciting time for the Scots language, because I just think we're bilingual, and that's the way I look at it, and always have. You know, it's one thing to speak as I'm speaking now and plain English, and it's another thing to talk about a Dreich Nicht or whatever. To me, it's the same thing, but you're entitled to take your pick.
Yeah, absolutely are, and you lose a lot of folk that ken that. But I mean, the thing is that we grew up talking how we talk, and I'm not going to be tell like folk afore me that what I'm talking isn't a language. It's not a lead. Of course, it's a lead. Community speaker. It's got a written tradition going back about 800 years, back to, you know, even before John Barber's The Bruce. It was one of the great languages of European literature when you consider Dunbar, Henryson, and then for it on to Burns, you know, and others. So, you know, it's got a tremendous heritage and it's got a tremendous relevance. And if you think back to the last census, Jim, in 2011, for the first time ever in the census, one of the questions was, did you consider yourself a Scots speaker? 1.5 million folk said aye. They didn't say yes, they said aye, we are. 1.5 million folk, that's a third of the population. Dear God, you know. Or as the wee fella said, James Grimmins helped my blow by, right, whatever. But Mick me, Scots isn't the Browns, Scots isn't our Willie, it's no DC Thompson. And Dundonian Scots, again, as a dialect, it's fantastic. But we have to mind that these are folk telling us what they want. And there's 1.5 million folk out there saying, this is our language. This is ours. Well, it is. It's a language of community. It's a language of folk. And folk can learn it. You know what I mean? It's not there just in a corner for a wee clique or a wee group of folk. It's everybody's. And we have to mind that.
Aye.
And one of the people that it belonged to was Burns. And we talked earlier on about the possibility of persuading you into doing some recitation of one of Burns' poems. Is there something you could do for us?
Recitation. Oh, I just mind it. I just mind what it meant. I mean, there's, as I said, I mean, you get when you're in Ayrshire, or even down here in Dumfries and Galloway, you're kind of surrounded by Burns. You can't get away from him. There's hardly a house you go into where he's no scratched a bloody poem in the window. But the thing is that he are very much, he's part of the cultural landscape, and and knowing a twee way, and we've still got that much more to do with Robbie. Hence, you know, the likes of the Burns and Robert Burns and the Scottish economy getting set up. The whole team up, the C21 team up in Glasgow Uni that Jerry Carruthers and Murray Pittock are involved in, saying to folk the potential for him bringing money into the local economy and strengthening that economy is a big thing. And it doesn't mean you say you've got to turn them into a tourist attraction per se. Make them even more part accessible part of your local landscape. And Robbie's been like that for me. Well, why should we not be making them part of the thing that will bring folk into a place and to generate economy and to generate jobs and work? And I think Robbie would entirely approve of that. So getting away from what you said there, though, I mean, there's that many poems, Ken Douglas, you ken yourself. When you're asked, well, what's your favourite Robbie poem or song, you're like, I mean, I have to say that probably one of my favourites is Call the Yows to the Nows, because he adapted it for a fantastic Kirk woman, of course, Tibby Pagan, as old Pagan, 1740 to 1820, I believe. All right, she was fain you come originally, Burnhead, but she ended up in Kirk when she was, I think she was 14, not quite sure why. So Call the Yows is a fantastic, fantastic poem, you know. But I'll Meet Thee on the Lee Rig, I think, is probably my favourite, Douglas, so I'm happy to read you that.
That would be great. I remember seeing something where you said that your father had written it out by hand for you.
Well, I never wrote it for me. My father died, he's been dead now for about 10, 12 years. 2009, I think he died. I was living in Manchester at the time. And he died on a Friday the 13th. Now, I'm an atheist, but sometimes you've got to wonder when folk decide to go. And when he died, we knew it was there, but my mother dug it out. She'd had it for years. When he was a young man, before he met my mother, he wrote, as you did back then, he hand wrote out on A4 paper a whole load of his favourite poems and songs, anything for, you know, Mark Monroe, Frank Sinatra, and all that kind of thing, and also Robbie Burns. And he would have been, early 20s, maybe even late teens, early 20s when he wrote these out. And it just brought him to life again for me, coming across this again, which I kent was there. And one of them was the Lee Rig. So when it came to his funeral, I delivered the eulogy at the funeral parlour. And I read out the poem, Faye his own handwriting. It was quite an emotional thing. I just about managed to hold it together. And I just thought it was completely art. And the fact that Robbie could bring something like that to an occasion like that and meant something so much to somebody that you could then reflect on their life in one of his poems, I think it says a lot about Robbie and what he means to so many of us, you know. So this is the poem, I'll Meet Thee on the Lee Rig. I'll no sing it, because Karen Polwart does a much better version than me. This is I'll Meet Thee on the Lee Rig. When o'er the hill the eastern star tells button time is near, my jo, and owsin frae the furrowed field return sae douth and weary o. Down by the burn, where scented birks wi' dew are hanging clear, my jo, I'll meet thee on the lee rig, my ain kind dearie o. At midnight hour in Murchus Glen, I drove and ne'er be eerie o. If through that glen I gaed to thee, my ain kind dearie o. Although the night were ne'er sae wild, and I were ne'er sae weary o, I'll meet thee on the lee rig, my ain kind dearie o. The hunter lows the morning sun to rouse the mountain deer, my jo. At noon the fisher seeks the glen, and down the burn to steer, my jo. Gie me the hour o' gloaming grey, it maks my heart sae cheery o, to meet thee on the lee rig, my ain kind dearie o.
Well done.
And my father wrote that poem out because actually I think he did it just after he'd met my mother, to be honest with you. We started winching, and that was, and he did say to me, you know, doing the odd time, didn't he? And my mother said the same. He would sometimes, after a wee dram, come out with a wee verse of that, sing a wee verse of that for her. And my mum, who's still on the go at 90, and that was my father, Barclay, to come. My mum was Barclay's ain kind dearie o. And I think the fact that Burns did that and resonates that much in folks' lives is amazing. And folk ask me why I love Robbie. How can you know?
There you go. And now that you're down in Dumfries and Galloway, do you get involved much with the sort of Burns scene down there? Are you involved with Ellisland or anything like that?
Aye, I'm certainly involved with Ellisland. Aye, great place, absolutely amazing place. And of course, it was shut through lockdown, like a lot of places in the coronavirus. But it opened back up on the 29th of May. And it's just that how more folk need to care about it. And we're getting increasing numbers of folk coming in. It's got a great collection, a fantastic museum collection, some fantastic stuff for Robbie himself, but just in such a beautiful, beautiful location by the banks of the River Nith, just about 5 or 6 miles, you know, north of Dumfries along the A76, just below Thornhill. So it's a fantastic place, and I take guided tours there for people that are coming in to visit and show them about the place. So it's an absolute joy. I'm enjoying it more and more that day, you know.
And do you get the chance to do any readings with your guests?
No, my poems, because I'm not important. You know, there's only one Ayrshire poet at Ellisland, there is no me.
But there's so many poems that are associated with Burns' time at Ellisland. You know, so I'm sure that a lot of people must go to Ellisland just to get the feeling that that's where he was when he was writing a lot of that stuff.
Well, he wrote Tam O'Shanter there. He came up with the idea of Tam O'Shanter there while walking down the Nith, down towards the Isle, or up to see his pal Robert Riddle at Friars Cars, or just out in the fields in the Plough. And that he says in a letter, there's this great myth that he wrote it in a day. Have you read it? No chance. He wrote it over a period, I think it was about 4 months. And I mean, it's just such an amazing, amazing story, never mind a poem. So he wrote that there. Ode to a Wounded Hare, which he saw somebody shooting and injuring just doing the water for where the ferm was. A Fond Kiss, Ye Banks and Braes, and most importantly, probably, the fact that he wrote Auld Lang Syne there, a thing that's sung and recited by maybe even billions of folk the world over, once a year, was written there, right there in that place, and that never fails to amaze me. So it's just such a special location, which he kent about, and he loved. That's why he picked it. That's why he picked the location, because he wanted somewhere where he could write and that would inspire him to write, but also turn his horn to the fairmen, which is what he wanted to give back to. Thankfully, Miller and Phil Swinton was able to provide him with the money to design and build the farmhouse. So the best of both worlds. Aye, the fairman didn't quite work out in the end, but 3 years, he was at 3 years, and he wrote about 130 poems and wrote something like, I think, 250 letters and correspondence, and it was just the most productive period of his life. So it's a privilege and a joy just to be able to even go there, but to be able to interact and show folk about and let them ken more about it, it's just fantastic. It really is, Douglas, you know.
Stuart, you've mentioned a number of works written by Burns while he was at Ellisland. Could we persuade you into reading one for us?
Aye, I mean, obviously, Tam O'Shanter's the big unit, and I've fully admiration for people that can stand up on a night of the year and come out with it for there. I'm lucky if I can come out with a single verse. I've got a memory like a, what was he say? I've got a memory like a tramp summit, so I can't remind you a lot of things, but one of my favourite poems that he wrote when he was down here, and he didn't write it at Ellisland, he actually wrote it, we think, at the Globe in Dumfries. And it's called I Murder Hate. So I'll read you that. I murder hate. I murder hate by flood or field, though glory's name may screen us. In wars at home, I'll spend my blood, life-giving wars of Venus. The deities that I adore are social peace and plenty. I'm better pleased to make one more than be the death of 20. I would not die like Socrates for all the fuss of Plato, nor would I with Leonidas, nor yet would I with Cato. The zealots of the church and state shall ne'er my mortal foes be, but let me have bold Zimri's fate within the arms of Cosby.
Well done.
A great choice. Great choice. Burns at his best with Greek and Roman mythology.
Well, he was a lot of folk think, you know, they talk about the heaven-taught ploughman. And I mean, that kind of ascribes some kind of external force to Rabbie. No, Rabbie was one of us, and thankfully his father saw fit and put a few bobbies into getting him a wee bit of an education over the air when he was about 8 or 9 years old. Probably as much to do with him being able to write, to keep and read, to keep an eye on the firm records to make sure they weren't getting shafted, you know, for the landowners. But that then instilled in him, you know, a desire to translate what was up here onto the page. And he was there having taught ploughman. He was very much a self-taught ploughman as well. So let's not ascribe some kind of supernatural thing to Rabbie. Rabbie very much got his ideas for what was written about him, but he was a clever man, a very clever man, and a well-read man at that. And I think, you know, that poem shows just what he was reading. And he wasn't just reading about the French Revolution and the American Revolution and dispatches and European. He was reading classical stuff, and he was, great.
Stuart, we're kind of running out of time now. But before we finish, is there something you've written yourself about Rabbie or related to Rabbie?
I think just about probably every Scots. I mean, I write a lot of poems in Scots, and I think just about all of them are related to Rabbie because they're in Scots, and he is an influential writer in terms of the Scots language tradition, very much. But I was asked to write, I decided, to write a wee poem about 4 years ago in Scots for actually on January 25th. And I kind of didn't write it about Rabbie so much as I wrote it in the spirit of Rabbie. And it's, you know, it's the kind of thing that basically I think that we all need to remember, especially at a time just now that we're in, but we're not seeing folk a lot of the time, and we're missing folk, and we're not getting to go where we need to go or where we want to go and to who we want to go. So I wrote this wee poem called Burns Nicht Blessing. Fare thee weel and travel blithely. May your days be long and lively. Then you look at him and greet. Look for it to the years ahead. Mak sicker with a ganging fit. Mak sure you get what goes with it. Hod for it like the newly born. Man isn't always made to mourn. There's them that's aye worse off than you, and them that's better off, is true. But pay nae heed to them wi' gun and pook and whinge at ilka turn. Nae pint and ruin yoursel and fash, and gain your best days out to snash, and them de lichten and stramash, wi' leave for stishy, fecht and clash. Best tell to them and other like, gan a hin, you wandering tyke. The time you're here, mon no be ta'en be grow and twisted on your lane. Tell them that's close you love them, then, just 'cause you can, tell them again. Which round the corners never ken, to whence their women, beasts, their men. Fare thee weel and travel blithely. May your days be long and lively. May the road ken fine to lead you on to where your friends will meet you.
It's a perfect sentiment to end on. Thanks for that, Stuart. Fare thee weel and travel blithely. Was that it?
Fare thee weel and travel blithely. May your days be long and lively. Absolutely.
Fantastic sentiment. Well, thanks very much for that, and thanks for giving up your time to tell us about your life with Robert Burns. Thank you, Stuart.
Thanks, Stuart.
Thanks, Douglas. Thanks, Jim. And I'm really appreciative of the fact that you asked me to share a few of my thoughts. So cheers. Thank you.